up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again. And this time we are here with Jake of Rivers of Nile. Great to be able to talk to you, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Alex, thank you so much for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here with you, bud.
Yeah, it's awesome because this is the third Rivers of Nile interview, and I'm really glad I got to interview a different member every time. All of you guys have like such unique perspectives on music, and I think that's really what like makes your band so unique. Like you have like five people with different types of talents and then different points of views on art, and then you come together and we get Rivers of Nile. So it's great to hear your perspective on the music today.
Fuck yeah, man. Thanks, dude. Oh yeah. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So the new album is The Work, which is scheduled to come out September 24th via Metal Blade Records. The first two singles you released, Focused and Clean, could that almost serve as a good representation of what the entirety of the work is going to sound like? Or being that, Rivers of Nile's music is a little bit more on the experimental side, that's just the tip of the iceberg?
Yeah, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's one of those. It's just an aspect of the creativity that's going to be found throughout the whole record. It's definitely kind of like both those singles so far kind of like encapsulate a very good portion of the sound that this album carries. But as far as like the rest of the other tracks, they all kind of do stand out in their own way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Conceptually, do you consider this just picking up where you left off after Where Owls Know My Name, or is this like a new beginning for Rivers of Nile, like a new era for the band, if you will?
You know, every album that we write feels like a new era of the band for us. So this one definitely has that effect, I would feel. I feel like we really leveled up with everything that we kind of expected out of each other and out of the band for this album. Yeah, definitely.
If you don't mind me asking, because a lot of people connected with Where Owls Know My Name in 2018, and I'm not saying this to blow smoke by any means, but
Yeah.
I consider that Where Owls Know My Name to be this generation's classic, like The Sound of Perseverance by Death or Focus by Cynic. Like I think it has like that great modern day technical death metal. Being that it resonated with so many people, if you don't mind me asking, was there maybe a little bit of pressure going into the making of the work, or were you just trying not to think about that at all?
For me, I try not to think about that stuff. I'm sure, speaking on behalf of everyone, I'm sure some of that pressure was there, and it's sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes it's unavoidable to not have to like deal with that stress. Sometimes you're able to step back and jump into the creative process and not be affected by it. But, I think we all kind of dealt with it a little differently.
Yeah. Well, just promise me when you guys are touring again, can you please have the saxophonist play Careless Whisper before you go on stage again? Because to hear that at Summer Slaughter was amazing.
Dude, we'll certainly try, man. We'll certainly try.
Yeah.
I would love that. That would be great.
Being that this is the fourth Rivers of Nile full-length album, I mean, going from The Conscious Seed of Light to now, like, have you always started the songwriting process with like a preconceived idea of what you want an album to sound like, or is there like a lot of experimentation and a lot of like rolling the dice, as I like to say?
That's a good question. I think because we have this 4-season album concept going on, we kind of are able to set our minds or connect to each theme and each season in a way that we would depict what that would translate for us musically. And I think even before we were at a particular season, we kind of already had certain musical ideas in mind for each one. And it's just kind of built upon leading up until we got to that album. So yeah, I think it's one of those things that we kind of have a rigid idea of what each season kind of emulate, kind of express itself musically, sonically. And then when we get to that album, we start writing it and just fleshing out and seeing what actually comes out of it, share it with each other back and forth.
This is the topic I wanted to talk about the most, actually, because having this 4-season conflict, I'm actually scheduled to interview Obscura tomorrow, and they kind of have like their four album series sort of thing. So this is
Okay,
so like
cool.
this is addressing the four seasons. That was something that this band was originally formulated based off. Was that just something that you went into the first album wanting to do, or did this concept kind of come as you were maybe after you released the Conscious Seed of Light? Maybe this idea kind of been like, okay, let's make it another season on Monarchy, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh yeah, good question. Actually, we had this mapped out before the Conscious Seed of Light. Like when we got the record contract from Metal Blade, to do four albums with them, we decided right then and there, that's when we kind of like started playing with the idea of what the albums would kind of all be about, and we came up with that, and it seemed like the best idea, and it really worked over pretty well. I think again, it really allowed that kind of time to build what each one was going to sound like before we were even there.
Yeah.
And that's something I remember really thinking. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool that we did that. Like, yeah.
This question may be a little on the more cliche side, but like having,
Yeah.
because the four seasons, I feel like any music, I don't care if it's grindcore or I don't care if it sounds like Cardi B, I think any musical genre could really express the four seasons because everybody feels a certain way in winter or a certain way in summer. And, there's,
Yeah.
yeah. So why do you feel that maybe the style of like this progressive technical death metal style of Rivers of Nile is sort of like the best way to get your point across as opposed to something more groove oriented or more thrash oriented, etc.?
Are you speaking in terms of like why do I think which style of music
Yeah.
is better for us to express ourselves?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good question. I think it's more because of like what we're inspired by and what we connected to, younger as musicians, and kind of therefore what we wanted to create, in the writing process, and kind of figuring out what that sound would be a representation of between two halves. And in my mind now, I think sometimes we are very, it's very clear, in our music. There's a lot of like progression and kind of has that Pink Floyd, King Crimson kind of effect to it. And I think of ourselves like, between these two spaces of trying to build a sound that we all kind of really listened to when we were younger. And I think that kind of like is where the choice of the unconscious choice or the conscious choice of which sound Rivers of Nile has created over the years. It's based upon like the bands that we were raised on, the bands that we kind of grew up on, and then kind of like regurgitated it back out into our own creativity, how we make our music. Um, but our inspiration comes from all over the place, not just music. I think it's, and probably for all bands too. Life experiences, shit that happens, things that we go through, and so on and so forth. But musically, in terms of like the actual direction of the genre that we chose, you know, uh, that's a good question. I think we've always kind of had a heart for songs that make you have to like stop and listen and pay attention, and the kind, they might feel a little drawn out sometimes, but being able to listen to an album from beginning to back that's filled with stuff like that, I think at the end of that kind of experience, it kind of like ages on you in a way. I think we all like that style,
Have
more
you
or less.
have you always needed to hear the music to come up with the lyricism in itself, or could like you maybe have like lyrics already written, or maybe an idea and that could help influence the sound of the music?
I think they both help influence each other. Um, I think more times it's music helps influence the lyrical process, because music kind of sets the you know the unintentional landscape of what the lyrics are going to follow, or what kind of lyrics could fit into that landscape. You know, um, And like sometimes we have ideas, Biggs, or maybe I'll have an idea myself. I'll have like a lyrical theme or an idea that we'll come up with that we know we want to use somewhere down the line, and we'll wait to find the appropriate song that one of us pump out or whatever to put it in there. But usually it's the music that comes first, and then the lyrics come second, kind of do.
Are you trying to leave the music open to interpretation, or do you want the listener to sort of be engaged in the concept? Because when I listen, so when the pandemic first hit, I was going and revisiting all the albums that I listened to from working in the press from 2017 onward, and like just to remind myself of good old days. May I just say, Where Owls Know My Name is definitely in my top 10. Smoke a little joint and enjoy.
Oh yeah, man.
But like it allowed me to, like, being alone in isolation, it allowed me to not just be engaged with the music, just headbanging and going nuts to it. It allowed me to, like, observe and experience what you were saying and what, like, the sort of goal was with it. So do you try to maybe engage the listener into the story as much as the music, or do you want the music to be more open to interpretation?
I think that we try to influence both, and I think that's kind of the weird twist with it, because it's two halves to how the story can be told. There's the actual story that's written, but consequently, what's more important than how we write the story, once we create it and release that into the world, is how the listener interprets that creativity, or how that listener interprets the story for themselves. That's what's actually more important, in my mind, at least, than them understanding the importance of the story that we write. You know what I mean? Because, like, yeah, you can find out what the story is exactly about that we wrote somewhere, I'm sure, down the line, But I think it's both, and I think it's both because they both do two different things that are important. You know, they do something that gives you an essential story, an outline that could be even a metaphor or a direct story, but it's kind of all fingers pointing towards something that's symbolically relative. You know what I mean? To something that we've either experienced or gone through. And I think that's when it being open to interpretation becomes important, because, if a person can't relate to the music or find some way of feeling like, connected to it, it's not, they're not able, it doesn't mesh, it doesn't. So yeah. So I think it's both. I think it's both. I think the idea, the concept being there is to kind of waver this tentative landscape where themes and ideas can be called upon and can be used, but really it's like, at the same time, there's a story, but then there's also like a story that the listeners create themselves.
Yeah.
And the experience they have with the music. So that is kind of the story. Each time, and it's, you listen, not just our music, but any album, you have that experience with. You can listen to it a million different times and have that experience a million different ways.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I've always said it will be, if there's a band that's like very concept album driven, like Mastodon, for example, or something like that. Like I've always said that it would be a great idea for fans to submit how they've experienced their music and then write a concept about that, almost like the art of experience in a way. And
yeah,
but
that's a good idea.
do you think, because you have a dedicated fan base that like to know every single twist and turn, every single note, every single story behind that album. So do you recommend, if a listener is just getting on board now with the work, for example, people are just discovering you now, and they really want to know the full concept of Rivers of Nile, do you recommend, should your albums be almost like Lord of the Rings in a way? Like if people really want to know the full concept of Rivers of Nile, they should listen to The Conscious Seat of Light first, Monarchy second, Owls third, and this? Do you almost feel like your album should be listened to chronologically?
That's a really good question. Honestly, I hate to say it, but like, I guess if they wanted to understand, each album directly for why it sounds the way it sounds. They kind of have to understand the sound before it and after it. So, you probably would want to have the listener check out everything, and maybe start from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And even though maybe the earlier stuff is not necessarily, what the listener may like, it still explains a lot of like where they came from and the sound that they were kind of working with or playing with or whatever that we were doing at that point in time with each album. So yeah.
I love
Yeah,
it. Yeah, I love it when bands like first albums sound nothing like what like people know them for. Like I'm a huge fan of All That Remains, and people know them now for either their metalcore sound or their more like soft rock sound. But their first album was straight like Morbid Angel or At the Gates. Like it was straight like melodic death metal. So like it's always cool to see how like it's not just a continuation. I feel like the work is not just a continuation of Where Owls Know My Name. I think it's just a continuation of the evolution for Rivers of Nihil.
Yeah, you nailed it. I'm definitely is. We try to find a new way to recreate ourselves, to re-express Rivers of Nihil, but yet still be honest with itself to some degree every album. And I think each one is a different listening experience for sure.
Yeah. And when it comes to playing the material live, like I saw you guys live countless amounts of times at this point. Most recently was Summer Slaughter 2019. But like when I saw you at the two shows at St. Vitus, you were performing Where Owls Know My Name in its entirety. But when you do like a headline, maybe like another headline show or maybe like, another opening slot or something like that, there are people who want to mix up the set list a little bit. You're obviously going to have to play a lot of the work now on the upcoming tour, but people are going to want to hear Owls, Monarchy. So do you think that maybe when you're making a set list together of different songs from different albums, that almost changes the context of the songs to begin with?
Yeah. Actually, I never even thought of that. That's a really good question. I'm sure it does, and I'm sure it kind of, in a weird way, blends the appreciation of the albums together in a way that like maybe one listener is only listening to this one or one listener is only listening to that one. But now that we're playing these songs in this order back to back, it kind of pulls them in and makes them kind of like, what's beyond each of those songs, on that record, you know what I mean? And I'm sure it definitely does. That's a really good observation.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I've always wondered that too because Fear Factory, they play Demanufacture live. That's one of the best concept albums ever. But like then I also saw them play like, they did one song of Digimortal, one song of Obsolete, then two songs of Demanufacture. I'm like, wow, it almost like is like another story in a way. So
yeah, another unintentional story being told.
Yeah. Well, to tell you the truth, I feel like every Rivers of Nihil show is as much of a story as the album is, because there's just something. I've also seen you play in different types of rooms before, and I've seen you like at the upcoming show with Black Dahlia Murder. Like that's going to be at Irving Plaza. It's going to be a bigger space, a little bit more. There's going to be a barricade, I'm sorry to the crowd surfers out there, but but then also seeing you in a different room, it almost seems like that the type of rooms you're playing in also create a different type of energy and a different type of experiment.
Yeah, man, that's a really interesting observation. I never thought of it like that, in terms of it like being its own story. But that's really cool. It's a really cool thing, and we certainly look forward to making many more stories down the road. Hopefully, playing as many more shows as we can.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I have one more question revolving around the story before we beat that concept to the ground any further. But having the sort of season concept in mind and expressing lyrics through this, is there almost kind of like a lot of looking outwards in this? Is there maybe like a lot of research that went involved in the making of these concepts, or is what you're expressing maybe your own personal experiences and maybe your own interpretation?
it's definitely it's very personal. You know, like all of the themes and lyrics are mostly derived from very personal experiences that Biggs has have or the band have or I have had in the past. Um, and you know, it's kind of built from a personal, you know, a personal level of experience that's collective with a certain amount of things that happen over a period of time leading up into that writing process or after the last, you know, creative process that we have written. Um, so, you know, it's definitely a collection of experience on a personal level. I feel like, you know, there's the occasional look up the better word for the lyric thing, you know. But I think in terms of like the season and the story that's being told, it's a very intuitive kind of uh, let the story tell itself, and we'll sit and let it come out of us. You know, I mean, I know for example, you know, on the work, um, this wasn't the lyrics weren't even finalized or even fully written completely until we were like in the studio,
Wow.
you know. So so a lot of this stuff and a lot of ideas like really only materialized and spoke and actually started to come into to focus, come into focus.
Yeah, pun
Um,
intended.
right, right. Oh shit, I did it. But that started to make sense. So we really this record had a whole new aspect to the writing process. You know, in terms of like lyrical themes. Um, like we had an idea, but as far as the content, it wasn't until we were in the studio that a lot of the stuff came out,
Wow.
and it was interesting. Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, not to brag to the viewers, but I actually did listen to the album. And first off, I want to congratulate you because this is definitely the pinnacle of Rivers of Nile. I gotta say, so
Thank you.
congratulations on that. And
Thank you, man.
really, I could tell that there was some sort of organic, sort of spur of the moment thing on it because when you go to a track such as Wait, for example, I mean, that is a complete spur of the moment, feels very organic sort of thing. You get to like a Tower 2 or Episode or maybe One Day, like it almost seems like that there's almost kind of like I feel like a sense of urgency was behind this and it worked very well in your favor. So I felt like Where Owls Know My Name, it had a great laid back organic feel behind it where everything kind of flowed together. This had the organic feel where you just went into it and had an urgency element behind it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. You know, it's definitely one of those things that we you know, let the songs just kind of speak to us and we kind of let them just kind of each one feel itself out correctly, I know, and let the parts kind of piece themselves together instead of like, you know, trying to put things together. You know, we let them piece, you know, themselves together as we're in that intuitive writing space, creative space. So yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for such a great conversation. Great to be able to talk with you. 3 members down, 2 more members to go. So.
Oh yeah, man. Fuck yeah, dude.
Yep. Is there just anything else with Rivers of Nile that you would like to promote for the release of the work? Obviously, you know, knocking on wood that this virus that shall not be named stays the fuck out of our way. You know, I know you got the upcoming tour with Black Dahlia Murder and After the Burial. Is there just anything else that you would like to plug?
Hey man, just everyone out there, please stay safe, and you know, look forward to seeing you guys all on tour. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing you.
Oh, dude, you'll be seeing me at the Barricade for that show.
Absolutely, man.
Yep.
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, of course.
Good talking to you.
Of course. Everybody, we are here with Jake of Rivers of Nile. The work coming out this September via Metal Blade Records. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.